The heat shimmered off the runway at Winston Private Airfield as a sleek, matte black Gulfstream G650 rolled into position. Embossed in silver near the cockpit were the initials RC. It wasn't just any jet, it was the pride of Raina Cross, 34, the founder and CEO of a billion-dollar global logistics empire. She stepped out of her Bentley in a tailored white suit, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. With her assistant trailing behind and her presence radiating quiet dominance, Raina approached the executive terminal like she'd built it herself. Behind the check-in desk stood Supervisor Karen Whitmore, mid-50s, clipboard in hand, eyes immediately narrowing. She scanned Raina with a judgmental glance that paused just long enough to betray her assumptions. "You must be lost," Karen said, voice coated in condescension. "This lounge is for jet owners only." Raina smiled politely. "I know. That's my jet out there." Karen chuckled, sharp and dismissive. "No, ma'am. That jet belongs to someone named RC, an executive, not a guest." Raina tilted her head. "You're looking at her." Karen's face tightened. "I don't appreciate games. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're banned from this terminal." Her voice was louder now. Other travelers began to notice. A few raised their phones. "I'm not leaving," Raina replied, her tone even. Karen waved to security. "Escort her out." Immediately, Raina didn't flinch. She simply tapped her earpiece. "Patch me through to Colonel Myers." Karen smirked. "Who do you think you are?" Raina turned slowly. "Someone you should have never underestimated." The jet engines weren't the only thing heating up. Karen had just picked the wrong woman to humiliate, and the fallout was seconds away. Karen's radio crackled as two security guards approached. "We have a situation at Gate 3, she said smugly, already feeling the thrill of authority surge through her chest. "Escort her off the property," Karen ordered, pointing directly at Raina. One of the guards hesitated. Ma'am," she says. "I don't care what she says," Karen snapped. "I run this terminal, and no one gets past me without proper clearance, especially someone pretending to own that jet." Raina stood calm, hands by her side. Her assistant, shaken, whispered, "Should I call the board?" Raina shook her head. "Let them watch this unfold." As the guards reluctantly approached, Raina looked Karen dead in the eye. "You're digging your own grave. You don't even know who I am, do you?" Karen smirked. "Oh, I know exactly who you are. Entitled, delusional. Another pretty face thinking money buys respect." Raina raised a brow. "Respect isn't bought, it's built. And I built this from scratch. While you were busy printing access passes, I was negotiating airspace with the Department of Defense." Karen scoffed. "Fairy tales. You won't be flying anywhere today. You've been banned from this facility and all 6 of our sister terminals. Per my authority." Just then, Raina's earpiece buzzed. "Miss Cross, Colonel Myers is on the line." Raina tapped it. "Colonel, I need a clearance override and confirmation of ownership transmitted to Winston Air immediately." "Thank you." Karen's face twitched, suddenly unsure. Seconds later, the terminal printer beeped. A document emerged with Department of Aviation credentials, the DoD seal, and a formal statement of jet ownership. Raina Cross, CEO, RC Holdings. Aircraft registered to her name. Full executive privileges authorized. Karen stared in disbelief, and Raina simply smiled. "You were saying?" The tension in the terminal was thick enough to cut with a knife. Karen snatched the printed document from the tray, her hands trembling slightly. Her eyes darted over the header, Department of Defense clearance verification, urgent. Her smirk faded. This doesn't prove anything," she muttered, voice cracking under the weight of her mistake. Raina took a step closer, her heels clicking like a countdown. "It proves everything. That I own the jet, that I've been vetted at the highest level, and that you just publicly humiliated a federal partner." Karen's jaw clenched. "You're bluffing." Raina reached into her designer handbag, pulled out a slim leather folder, and handed it to the closest security officer. Inside, government contracts, FAA executive access clearance, and an official letter from the Pentagon authorizing Raina's unrestricted travel due to her company's defense logistics role. The security guard's eyes widened. "She's legit, more than legit. She outranks everyone in this terminal." Karen's lips parted, but no words came. The terminal manager, a greying man in a navy blazer, had been watching from behind the glass office. Now, realizing the situation, he strode over briskly. "Miss Cross, I sincerely apologize. I was unaware you were on site." Rayna folded her arms. "Your supervisor banned me from boarding my own jet. In front of passengers. Cameras." The manager turned to Karen, his expression sharp. "Karen Whitmore, hand me your badge." Karen blinked. "What? You're done. Effective immediately, but I was just following protocol." "No, you were following your prejudice." Gasps rippled through the lounge. One of the bystanders whispered, "She really thought Rayna was lying." Rayna turned to the guard. "Please escort her to the parking lot. She won't be needing a gate pass anymore." Karen's reign of arrogance ended before her next shift even began. By the time Karen was escorted out the front doors, 2 passengers in the lounge had already uploaded the video. One clip showed her barking orders, denying Rayna access. The other captured the exact moment she was fired, with captions like "instant karma" and "she picked the wrong woman." Within 20 minutes, the footage hit 10, formerly Twitter, Instagram Reels and TikTok. Rayna hadn't even boarded her jet yet, and the hashtags were already trending. #JetJustice, #RaynaCross, #FiredAtTheGate. Rayna sat in the executive lounge, sipping lemon water, unfazed. Her assistant Mila scrolled her phone nervously. "Rayna, you're blowing up, like everywhere. News outlets are already DMing us." Rayna sighed. "I don't want to make this about me, but maybe it's time someone did something about this kind of behavior." Mila hesitated. "Should we release a statement?" "No," Rayna said. "We'll release data. Show the world how often this kind of thing happens to people who can't call the Pentagon." Her eyes flicked to a screen showing local news coverage. Woman denied entry to her own jet. Supervisor fired on the spot. A reporter outside Winston Terminal said, "Sources confirm the woman denied access was Rayna Cross, a high-profile defense contractor and philanthropist. The supervisor has been terminated. Legal action is now rumored." In the comments, hundreds of users wrote, "Imagine doing this to someone who owns the jet. What happens to regular folks?" She stayed calm. That's power. They thought she didn't belong because of her skin. "Let that sink in." Rayna leaned back. This wasn't just a moment. It was a message, and the world was listening. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. White House switchboard. She picked up. "Rayna Cross speaking." "Miss Cross," came a calm, firm voice over the line. "This is Deputy Director Langston from the Office of Civil Rights at the White House. We've seen the footage." Rayna stood, her posture instinctively straightening. "I figured you might," Langston continued. "What happened to you today is unacceptable. But what worries us more is how often it happens to people without your influence or visibility. The President is interested." Rayna's eyes narrowed. "Interested in what exactly?" "A federal advisory role, something new. We're forming a task force to investigate discrimination in private sector gatekeeping, aviation, real estate, finance. We need someone who understands power and humility. You've demonstrated both today." There was a pause. Rayna walked to the large window overlooking the runway. "You know I've never used my name to make noise. I build quietly. And that's exactly why we're calling," Langston replied. Mila looked up from across the room, puzzled by Rayna's silence. "I'm not looking for a title," Rayna said finally, "but if I can use this to protect people who can't fight back the way I did, then I'm listening." Langston's tone warmed. "That's all we hope to hear. We'll send you a full briefing. The President would like to meet you in person. Tomorrow." Rayna smirked. "Tell him I'll bring my own plane." After ending the call, she turned to Mila. "Let's do something with this moment." "You mean, like go public?" Rayna nodded. "But not for sympathy, for accountability. We're launching an initiative. Research, support, stories." Mila smiled. "You're turning a slap into a movement." Rayna looked back out at her jet. "No, I'm turning silence into action." By the next morning, the entire country had seen the footage. Talk shows debated it, news anchors replayed it, and Karen Whitmore's name was plastered across headlines like, "Fired in 4 minutes, the supervisor who banned a jet owner racism at 30,000 feet. Rayna Cross speaks, Out privilege denied. How one woman's jet became a symbol. Karen sat at her small kitchen table, her coffee untouched, hands trembling as she read the emails. Dozens of hate messages, a few support ones, but mostly disbelief. She picked up her phone and dialed her sister. "They're making me out to be a villain. I didn't know who she was." "You didn't have to know," her sister said coldly. "You saw a confident black woman and assumed she didn't belong." "I didn't mean—" "You didn't care," her sister snapped. "And now everyone sees what I've always known. You judge first. Think later." Karen hung up, shaking. Then came the doorbell. Outside stood two women, one black, one Latina, holding clipboards. "Ms. Whitmore?" one asked. Karen blinked. "What now?" "We're with the Equal Rights Accountability Initiative. You're on our watch list. A formal review is underway. Multiple complaints from your past are being reopened." Karen's face drained of color. Back at the airfield, Raina prepared for takeoff, but not before checking her inbox. Her team had compiled a list of 8 prior complaints filed against Karen by travelers of color, each ignored or dismissed. Raina nodded grimly. Then this wasn't her first time. She forwarded the file to the Department of Transportation. Make it her last. As Raina's jet ascended into the sky, Karen's world was falling apart, piece by piece. Not just because of one mistake, but because this time there were cameras, there was power, and there was Raina Cross. Raina landed in D.C. to more than just fanfare. A crowd had gathered at the private terminal, activists, media, even young students holding handmade signs. "We stand with Raina. Belonging has no color. Her jet, her rights," but Raina wasn't there for attention. She was there to begin something bigger. In a closed-door meeting at the White House, she sat across from cabinet officials, lawmakers, and civil rights leaders. "We're not just talking about private jets," Raina said. "We're talking about access to space, to respect, to freedom of movement without suspicion." She presented data from her team. Thousands of documented cases where black and brown professionals were questioned, delayed, or outright banned in elite spaces. Golf clubs, airports, business lounges. A senator leaned in. "Why now, Ms. Cross?" "Because now you can't ignore it," she replied. "The world saw it happen to someone you thought was untouchable. So imagine the ones no one films." The room fell silent. By week's end, Raina launched Clear Skies, an initiative to track discriminatory incidents in travel, create legal pathways for redress, and provide emergency response teams to victims. The media dubbed it the Jetline Movement, and support flooded in. Celebrities, military officers, CEOs, even rival airline executives sent statements of solidarity. "This isn't just about race," one wrote. "It's about decency." Meanwhile, Raina declined every TV interview. "I'm not the story," she told her team. "The movement is." And just like that, she transformed a viral moment into a policy-changing force. Her final quote in a New York Times op-ed sealed it. "When you try to ground a woman like me, you just give her more reason to fly." Karen stared blankly at the screen in her dark living room, watching Raina Cross deliver a keynote speech at the United Nations Human Rights Forum. Raina stood tall, poised, commanding attention without shouting, her words measured but unforgettable. Karen's world had shrunk to silence and shame. She had been officially blacklisted from all aviation-related supervisory positions pending federal review. Her retirement savings were frozen due to ongoing civil rights lawsuits. But what haunted her most was her reflection. It wasn't just Raina's face she kept seeing. It was the faces of every woman she'd doubted, every traveler she dismissed. She finally opened her laptop and typed a public apology, greater than to Raina Cross, and to every person I've ever made feel small. "I am sorry. I let my bias speak louder than my humanity. I lost everything, but maybe I deserve to. I hope to spend what's left of my life learning, not judging." She clicked post, then closed the screen. Her apology went viral within hours, but not for the reason she hoped. Most comments read, "Now she's sorry." Funny how humility shows up when power disappears. Apology accepted, consequences still stand, but Raina saw it, and for a moment she paused. To Mila, she said, she finally sees herself. "Will you respond?" Raina thought, then shook her head. Forgiveness isn't a tweet, it's change. Instead of replying, Raina made another donation, this time to a scholarship fund for underprivileged women pursuing aviation careers. The message was clear: she wasn't here to punish, she was here to build what others tried to deny. A year later, Raina stood inside a sprawling new facility near Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. The sign read, "The Raina Cross Academy of Aeronautics and Executive Travel." Inside, young women of color trained to become pilots, aerospace engineers, and aviation entrepreneurs. "It started because someone told me I didn't belong," Raina said during the ribbon cutting. "Now, no one here will ever have to prove their worth to small minds." The academy received hundreds of applications in its first week. Former pilots volunteered to train the next generation. Even major airlines pledged funding. And on a wall inside the main lobby, framed in glass, was the infamous photo, Karen pointing at Raina, moments before security approached. Beside it, Raina had written in gold letters, "This isn't about revenge. It's about rewriting the ending." Media outlets hailed her as a visionary. Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people. Still, Raina kept her life simple. She never sold her story to Hollywood. She never accepted a dime from networks, and when asked why, she simply replied, "Dignity isn't for sale." Her jet, still flying, but now it carried not just a CEO, but interns, advocates, girls who had never even dreamed of stepping foot on a runway. As it soared across the country with Raina at the helm, people no longer whispered in disbelief. They cheered, because they knew exactly who she was now. And more importantly, who she helped others become. Raina sat in her jet's cabin, eyes closed, as the engines hummed toward cruising altitude. Mila sat across from her, beaming. "You know what today is, right?" Raina cracked one eye open. "A quiet Tuesday? It's been exactly 1 year since everything, the terminal, Karen, the viral storm." Raina smiled softly. "Feels like 10. She glanced out the window, clouds rolling beneath them. In her lap was a letter, a handwritten note from a 15-year-old girl in Detroit. "Greater than Miss Raina. I saw your story in class. Before that, I thought people like me couldn't even get past airport security. Now I want to be a pilot." Raina placed the letter in her notebook, beside a growing stack of similar messages. They came from everywhere: Brazil, Nigeria, the Philippines, Mississippi, all written by kids who now believed they could fly. "You ever think about what would have happened if Karen had let you on that jet without a word?" Mila asked. Raina paused. "I'd have taken off, had a quiet trip, and probably never built any of this. Funny how the worst moment," Mila started, became the spark Raina finished. The cabin intercom buzzed. "Ms. Cross, this is your captain. We've reached cruising altitude. Next stop, Seattle. Clear skies all the way." Raina unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. "Let's get to work." "On what?" she smiled. "The next runway, because once the world tried to ground Raina Cross, but instead she built a runway for millions. And from that day forward, she was never grounded again."